The Daisy Chain podcast is proudly supported by Personal Farewells, proudly family-owned and operated independent funeral directors located in Sydney.
Good morning. This is Emma from the Daisy Chain podcast. I am here today with Anne-Marie McLeod, who runs a business called McLeod with a Silver Lining. Anne-Marie is an end-of-life celebrant and doula. So welcome, Anne-Marie.
Thank you. Hello. Nice to be here.
Thank you for joining us. How are you today?
Pretty good. Pretty good.
Good. Excellent. So we're going to talk a little today on what's an end-of-life doula. Who needs one? We're going to chat about your journey that's brought you to this point, and how you got into this line of work, and then we'll see where the conversation takes us. I'm sure we'll meander along the way and take a bit of a scenic route, but we're going to start with I think the first question is, what is an end-of-life doula?
Yeah, great question, and it's the question that I'm asked pretty much by every single person when they ask me what I do. The next question is, what is an end-of-life doula? So the word doula itself is actually quite an ancient word coming from Greek origin, and so it means a woman who serves, and it refers to the one who provides non-medical support and information through life's transitions, so most commonly birth and death. So back in the days, before hospitals and midwives, the women in the village took care of each other during birth and also during death. So that's where the terms death doula, death midwife, end-of-life doula all come from. And in more recent times, I've come across the word death walker, which I actually really love now. It was coined by Zenith Virago. She's the founder of the Natural Death Care Centre in Byron Bay. I did some training with her, and she's an incredible inspiration for me. But I decided to call myself an end-of-life doula because I felt like that was a bit softer.
Yeah.
But the more I do this work, the more I'm resonating with the word death walker, because it really is about walking with people who are experiencing dying and death, walking beside them, holding their hand, guiding them, advocating for them, and supporting them through a time that is largely felt as the complete unknown. So death doulas also support families and loved ones who are caring for the person who's dying. Often those people are doing it for the first time, and they can feel really out of their depths. They're going through an incredibly emotional time. Grief often starts for us when we hear of the diagnosis. That's where the grief first sets in, and just people feel like they just don't know what to do, and so they have to go through this emotional time. On top of that, they have to start doing some hard things, making some hard decisions. So it's important that people know that they don't have to do that alone. And basically an end-of-life doula is someone who can support in a range of different ways, depending on what you need and how you're feeling about it. The journey is different for every family, but it's really about finding out what this particular family needs and what the individual needs, and personalising a service for them.
Yeah, beautiful. So how did you end up at this point in your life? Like, what had happened? What were you doing before? How long have you been doing this? How did you end up exploring this as an opportunity and something that you felt drawn to?
Very unexpectedly. My beautiful young mum got very sick very quickly and died about 5 years ago. My sister and I were able to find a way to honour her dying wish and care for her at home. She did have some time in hospital, but we were able to take her home and care for her right to the very end. And even though that was an incredibly difficult time, it was probably the hardest thing that we've ever had to do. But it was pretty amazing too. It was, as sisters, as daughters, it was just absolutely so special to be able to be there and just spend that time with her. Even though, looking back now, I'm sure that we could have done a whole lot more, but that's all part of the learning, so yeah, that was a really life-changing time, and we were actually also able to give her a very personal, unique beachside farewell ceremony that we did by ourselves, which was just really exactly what she wanted. The moon was rising, and that was just beautiful.
Wow.
And I didn't know it then, but that was a catalyst, a change for me in my life, and lots of little things sort of happened after that, but it led to me becoming redundant in my job. I'd been working in big corporate companies for about 25 years, never really felt too fulfilled or like my work had any meaning whatsoever. And so being made redundant gave me that push into a life change, and gave me, all of a sudden I had all this time on my hands to reevaluate life. What do I want to do? And I can actually only describe what happened as a really magical, just a really magical experience that just very loudly and clearly said to me, you need to be working in the space of death and dying, and I'd never really thought about it before. Mum wasn't the first loss that I'd experienced, but she was definitely, like I said, probably the catalyst for all of the change that has led me here. But I do realise that all of the other losses and deaths that I've experienced in my life have been leading me here in some way. I just had to do a stint in corporate for a quarter of a century first.
I'm sure there was lots of skill that you learned during that part of the journey.
Exactly. And it is part of the journey. That's right. And all of those skills, help me with the running of the business side of things. But, all of the lessons, I feel even though, obviously, Mum's death was awful and sad and heartbreaking, but I'm actually very grateful for the lessons and the blessings that her life and her death have given me. And so I guess everything that I'm doing now is with, a sense of gratitude to Mum, which is really special.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah. And I know we spoke briefly before, and I said it's really beautiful that the majority of the guests that we had on the podcast have been through that journey where something has happened in their life with a loved one, and that's kind of inspired them and given them the purpose to do what they're doing now, which I think, that's the best gift that someone can leave us with, is that purpose to whatever it is, whether it's, with the Daisie chain, with bringing music and movement and joy for yourself, new programs, whatever it might be. It's taking that experience and that profound change and being able to then, I guess, transform that into something that then helps other people.
Yeah, it's a heck of a legacy for them, isn't it?
Yeah.
Without them even knowing what they've passed on to us. It is an incredible legacy. And I think that it helps bring so much more meaning to our work. I mean, I was that kid who never knew what she wanted to do when she grew up. I think I wanted to be a school teacher at one stage and, all the standards, but I really just never had a sense of passion or a calling until literally a few years ago, when it was literally an undeniable calling. And I was like, oh, wow, I've heard about this. I've heard other people that have this, but I never had it myself. Like, wow, that's amazing. Thanks, Mum. It was kind of cool.
Yeah, it's really interesting because my almost 16-year-old is, going through doing work experience and talking to careers advisors and all that. And it's like, you kind of go through school and your late teens, early 20s, being asked, what do you want to do? And I think for me now, as a woman in my 40s, it's actually not what I want to do, it's who I want to be. And that purpose that, it might not hit us till something happens later in our life. And it's that old adage of, if I knew what I knew now when I was 16, 15, what would I do differently? But, it's hard when they're saying to you, I don't know what I want to do, Mum. I don't know what I want to do for a job. And it's like, well, you actually don't need to stress about it because, what happens is what's meant to happen.
I completely resonate with that too. I am in my 40s as well. And, I think, and it's not the first time I was made redundant either, but the last time I was made redundant when I was much younger, probably, I don't know, in my early 30s, I just had to go out and get a new job. I didn't even think about, oh, this could be an opportunity for a life change, you know. So it is interesting. We find out what we need to know when we need to know it, I think.
Yep.
And we do spend time building up our skills in other areas for whatever reason. But now, you know, we kind of get it, don't we?
Yeah.
Starting
so
to get
much
it.
wiser. Yeah, I said, I still don't know what I want to do, honey.
You're doing it.
I know, I am doing it. So once you made that decision and you had that calling and you became clear on your purpose, what's the next step? Like, is there some kind of training? Can anyone become an end of life doula? I guess, what's that next step look like?
Yeah, there's plenty of training. There's plenty of information out there. It was a minefield at the beginning, actually, because first of all, I called a friend. Like, as soon as I sort of had this, this moment, I wrote down, call Evie, because I knew that she had done some training as an end of life doula, and I just thought, okay. And she was amazing, because she said, call this person, watch this podcast, watch this little movie, find this person on YouTube, read this book. She just gave me this whole list of things to do, and that just opened a massive can of worms for me. And for months I spent time doing just that, reading things, watching things, talking to people, researching. Never been a great researcher before either, and just finding out what people are doing in this space. And I ended up doing training with the the Natural Death Care Centre in Byron Bay, which was amazing. Her Death Walker, Zenith Virago's Death Walker training was life-changing for me. It was really incredible. There's heaps of other training out there as well. There's a lot of people doing a lot of good things in this space, and I would like to do more training as well. I'm waiting for some of it. I'll be honest, I'm waiting for some of it to be accredited, because people like accreditations and all that sort of thing. I honestly felt like I had a lot of natural ability and a lot of natural gift, in a way, in this space to be with people who are dying, because I have experienced it several times in my life. So the training that I did just felt like I was home, in a way. So, I feel like I need to do more training, because people want to see lots of accreditation. But the other part of me feels like I don't want this to sound, I feel like what I was about to say was going to sound very egotistical, but just from a very heart-centered space, I feel like I know that I can help people feel comfortable in this space, which is not something that you can learn, in my opinion. You either can be in this space comfortably, or you can't be. Some people are very, very scared of death. Some people just can't stop crying. Some people, there's lots and lots of different experiences that people have had. And I mean, I used to be someone who cried a lot too. I'd cry at the Kleenex commercials, but this is different. And so the training for me really formed a fantastic foundation for me to continue. And it's just ongoing learning. It never ends. And the biggest training that I get is every time I'm with another person in the space of dying, because every person is different. Every family is different. Every life is different. And so, there's only so much, especially when you're, in a brand new business, you can only spread your education dollar so far as often as you can. And you can be a student for life, really. So it's where you get your learning from. So did I answer your question?
Yeah. Okay. So what, I guess, we've already touched on the fact that every life's different, every family's different, everyone's going through their own journey and their own emotions in a completely different way to everyone else. There is no normal. There's things that are common, I guess, but there's no normal. But I am going to ask you, what are common questions that when you're going through this process with someone, I guess, how do people find you to start with? What's the process? When do they come to you? All of those things. How does what you do actually happen?
Mostly word of mouth. I mean, I've got a website and social media and all of that, and it's starting to get out there, but I think this is the kind of, I'm a funeral celebrant as well, as you know, so particularly people like to go, oh, who was that person that you told me about? Because it's such a personal space to be in, I'm in people's homes and, talking to them at very vulnerable times. I think, word of mouth is definitely the best form of advertisement. So people find me, I feel like they're just guided to me so far. But because I don't do much advertising or anything at all. The questions they ask me, usually the first few questions are, what do I do? Who do I call? What's happening? Like, what do I need to do? Because people are in that space of, my parent is dying. I have to be at hospital, but I just don't know what questions to ask. So, I can give them some ideas about, right, you ask them questions where they're up to. And, I had a friend on the phone just a couple of days ago, actually, about her dad. And, she just felt like she was really struggling to get answers between the aged care centre and the hospital. There was a lot of miscommunication and she was very, very stressed. A few days later, it has started to really calm down and she's in a much different place, which is great because I was able to give her, a bit of a list of questions to ask. Every situation is different, so those questions are going to be slightly different, but it really is about, where are you up to, what do you need, and empowering them to ask the questions that feel really hard and really confrontational, because a lot of people think, oh, the doctors and the nurses, they're the experts, I'll just be guided by them, which is all good and well in a sense, except for the part where they are very, very busy with lots of other patients and your priority is your person and you need answers and you need them now. And you need to be persistent and you need to be in their face. A lot of people are like, oh, I called and called and they haven't returned my call. Keep calling or go in there, be in their face, stand in front of them until you get the answers that you need. Where do you want to care for your person? Can you take them home? Do you want to take them home or do you want them to be in hospital? If so, what can you get to make them the most comfortable? At this point in time, it really is about, when you know that they're dying and there's nothing more medically that can be done for them, I feel it's probably the most important time to be thinking about, first of all, how can we make them the most comfortable that they can be? Because none of us want to see our loved one in pain. And where can you be and what do you need so that you can be where you need to be? If you want to be beside your person holding their hand, then do we need to make a plan to get the kids picked up from school? Is somebody cooking for your kids? Can you get to the hospital every day? A lot of people come out of the woodwork wanting to help, family members that you might not have seen for a while can be a little bit tense having them around if you haven't seen them for a while. So give them a job to do. The kids are going to be okay if somebody else picks them up from school a few days a week, or because this is all usually fairly temporary and sometimes it's not, and then that's a different conversation. So the questions that they mostly ask me are, what do I do? Who do I call? What do I have to plan? If they want to keep their person at home, well then great. How can we get the resources that you need? Who do we call? What do you need? Do you need a hospital bed? Do you need ventilation? Do you do you need a home nurse? Do you need an extra cleaner? Do they need help going to the toilet? Can you bathe them? Do you want help with that? So it's a lot. There's a lot involved. But it could also be just, some people are more pragmatic about it. So they might just need kind of like a list of questions, a bit, so you help them form a to-do list, basically. These are all the things that you have to think about. Is the will in place? Do you know where the will is? Do they have any end of life plans or wishes somewhere that you can read about, finding out where all of that paperwork is, because there's that, legal side of it, which we don't like to think about. But, so basically giving them, that list of what you need to know, and you need to know where is it, who's got it, who needs to see it, But then there's all of the practical stuff as well. And there's all the emotional side as well. So some people are like, yeah, I know what to do. I'm fine. I can organize the kids. I can organize whatever, but I just need someone to talk to.
Yeah.
And not from a sense of being counseled, but just being supported.
Yeah.
Someone who has walked in their shoes, who knows what they're going through, who provides a safe and caring space for them to just talk about whatever they need to talk about, so that they can almost, okay, yep, I can go in for another day and I'm going to be okay. Some people don't like to cry in front of their person who's dying because they think that puts a bit too much pressure, and which I don't really subscribe to that. I actually think that sharing our emotion with the person who's dying is actually quite cathartic for both of us. They want to know that they're going to be missed. They want to know that they're loved. They want to know that we're going to be okay. And we have to have these conversations with them. So, I encourage people to, have all the conversations in this time, because this is time you'll never get back. So if you can't cry in front of them, but you need to cry in front of me, let's make sure that you have a lot of crying time so that you can then go and be the strong person that you feel you need to be. And, and it evolves, everyone is different. Everyone needs something different.
Yeah. And I think a couple of things like popped into my mind then is, you're saying about the medical staff and the doctors, the medical profession, and I see this in aged care, the medical profession are very task focused. So, they've got their list mentally, whether it's a physical list, but they've got their jobs that they need to tick off. And it's not to say that they forget that we're, people, but, when you're task focused, you're less focused on the emotions. And then the flip side of that is, when we are emotional and we're caught up in the emotions, we tend to, we get foggy around the practicalities. So, the fact that you're there to kind of bridge that gap between the emotional and the practical, I think is a huge thing. And I see that in aged care too. I have a question, which is a little random, if that's me. I guess that, like we said earlier, the thing that keeps popping up in these podcast interviews is that, these are all topics that we don't tend to talk about until we need to talk about them. So whether it's, how to manage with a disability that might come on, or you've had an accident and you've suddenly got this disability that you didn't have before, whether it's dealing with funeral plans, end of life plans, going into aged care, all of those kind of topics we don't tend to think about, and most people don't even consider until it becomes part of their everyday life. Do you think, so we teach kids about the birds and the bees and babies and life at school, and then we talk about, hormones and puberty. Do you think that there's a place in school for talking about death and end of life?
That's a great question. I'm not 100% sure that it needs to be in schools, but it absolutely needs to be a conversation that children are able to have, whether it's, and if their parents are not feeling like they're not equipped to have that conversation with them, well then, definitely children need to understand death and not be afraid of it. I think we need to normalize death with our children. Maybe it can be something that they are taught at school. I'm not quite sure what that would look like, but I definitely think that children need to be involved in the conversations about death so that they understand that it is a really natural part of life. When no one's getting out of here alive, right?
No.
It's inevitable.
Yeah.
And if we try and I understand people feel like they need to protect their kids because it's hard. Yeah, it's hard. But if we've never talked about it and they have to face it for the first time as an adult, tell you what, it's a whole lot harder.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. They've never talked about death in their life. I mean, I grew up in an environment where we were going to funerals all the time because I grew up in a church, and we were going to funerals all the time because the church had a really old population, aged population, congregation, I should say. And I used to cry my eyes out, but it was because I just loved these old people so much. They were so kind to me, and, you know, and so I was never afraid of it. I was always aware of it, you know, that it was very much, you know, and although I may not have the same beliefs as how I was raised now, about what happens after death, just knowing that it was something that could happen at any time to healthy people, seemingly healthy people, to old people, to young people, you know, accidental death, expected death, people get sick, people, you know, die in car accidents. You know, I think talking about it and allowing our children to be part of those conversations is really, really important, because it just gives them that understanding of a very important part of life. When my mum was dying, my little 2-year-old Nick, she was just short of being 2. She was around a lot because she wasn't at school yet or anything. And that was just so precious.
Yeah.
She held mum's hand a lot. And she was at first a little bit like, oh, I don't want to go in there. You know, she doesn't look good. You know, she didn't talk that much actually, but you can tell she was just like, no, you know, she didn't want to go. But we just held her and, you know, showed her that it was okay to touch her hand, and, you know, grandma can hear you, so you can sing if you want. And, you know, and she heard us playing music, and those memories have stayed with her, you know, throughout her early childhood. And she's had these beautiful, it's amazing what they remember too. She's had these beautiful comments about things about grandma and when grandma was dying. And I feel like that's just a really beautiful gift that we were able to give her, because now when she hears about someone, it's, you know, remember she met someone at kindy whose grandma had just died. She'd been away for a few days. And, oh, where have you been? Oh, my grandma died. And she walked up to this little girl and held her hand and said, my grandma died too. And they hugged. And it was just this beautiful thing. Like, you know, which is I just, so yes, it does need to be somewhere very poignantly in children's lives, for sure.
It's I mean, I've taught in aged care for the last 10 years, and my girls are now almost 16 and almost 14. So when I first started, they'd come with me in the school holidays, or the little one before she even started school. And yeah, same. I would, you know, I'd come home from teaching classes, and, you know, the general chat around the dinner table, you know, how's your day? And then they'd be like, you know, how's Joyce? And I'd be like, well, sadly, you know, Joyce passed away, or, you know, this happened today, this person's not very well. And again, it's part of conversation. So it definitely, it takes away or helps to alleviate the fear of the unknown side of it.
And I think that that's the most important part, removing the fear from death, because it is, it's the most common fear, I'm pretty sure. You know, there's like public speaking and death. I can't remember which one comes first, but, you know, it's a huge fear. And, you know, I talk to my family all the time about, you know, the funerals that I'm doing, and, you know, just sharing with them some of the experiences that I'm seeing. And, you know, my niece and nephew they're now 7 and 12, and they ask me questions about, you know, so how was that funeral that you did the other day, Auntie? And we talk about it, and you know, and I ask them, you know, what do you think you would like if you had to have a funeral? And they're like, and it's not that we want to wish anyone to need to talk about that. No, it's not that we want to wish anybody dead, you know, but just getting them to, you know, and sometimes they're like, oh, I have no idea, but you're just planting that seed for them to think about, you know, and talking about what we want, because, you know, they're going to be the ones that have to plan our funerals. And so we're like, you know, I want this and I want that, and, you know, just making it a part. And it's, you know, we don't talk about it every day, but it's definitely a common conversation in the family. I think is really lovely. And it's becoming a common conversation in my friends circle as well, because people are very fascinated with the fact that I do this work, and they have so many questions, you know, and it's getting them to think about their own mortality and the mortality of their parents, which at our age is sadly becoming, you know, we're right in the thick of that age group. And so I think that, you know, in our community as well, like not just in our families, but in our communities, it's something that we need to get better at. Things like Dying to Know Day and Day of the Dead, really important days of the year for us to, spread awareness and to open up more and more conversations. And so that's a work in progress for me. I'm wanting to, get better at doing that in my own community. And I'm actually also looking at starting a small grief support circle, because there's not much sort of in this local area, and just, fairly informal place for people to come, not for counselling or anything, but just to come to be together with other people who are going through the same thing, so that they know that they're not alone, because it can be a very, very lonely road when you say goodbye to somebody, because our friends and family, as amazing as they are, supportive and loving, and we need to have them around, if they've never been through it before, they don't know what to say. They don't know how to react all the time. And some of them can get what I've heard referred to as like grief fatigue. It's like, oh, we're still sad about your mum's death. How long ago was that? They don't say those words, but that's the feeling that you can get. And you sort of shut down from some people because you think that they're not responding anymore. Like, I don't feel supported by them. But it's because they don't know what to do. They don't know what to say. So, having a place where you can go and that you can say whatever you need to say in a safe space, and people there are on the same page. They know what you're going through, and they can just be compassionate. It's not to fix anything. We don't fix grief. There's no cure for grief. We learn to live with it. It changes as we grow, and we, we pack it into our little backpack and carry it around with us, in a sense, not in a morbid sense, but just it becomes part of us, and we learn to manage life with that sadness, with that loss, and people need to have a space where they can, talk about that and share that. But then as we get better at talking about it in families and in community groups and everything, maybe we won't need grief circles anymore, because people will be better at it,
I think the other thing is, I was just thinking then about my own experience with, losing loved ones is, and we're talking about the usual journey of life. We're not talking about unexpected death or accidents in this situation. But, if someone has gone through that process, whether it's sick or old age, there's such a long kind of lead up to that process. And then you've got the funeral, and then it's almost like once you've had the funeral, it's like we don't talk about it anymore. And I think that's a massive something that we don't talk about, because like you said, people don't know what to say. And rather than saying, I actually don't know what to say, we just don't say anything. And there's so much focus on the process before and the lead up, and then obviously the practicalities of planning the funeral or the memorial or whatever that looks like. Once that happens, then the people that are dropping dinner off every day aren't doing that anymore. The people that are taking the kids to school don't take them quite so much, and then that peters off. People stop asking, if you need help, or if reach out if you need anything. Then that's probably the hardest part for a lot of people, is that suddenly it's quiet. And suddenly that focus that's been on caring for that person, making that person comfortable, that's done. And then we're by ourselves.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's when it becomes very, very lonely. And it's, it's that sense where the world has just gotten back to normal all of a sudden, but my world will never be the same again. People out there are laughing and having a good time and going to parties, and I just want to cry all day. And it's not like that for every person, but for a lot of people it is, and they feel like, I'm so alone in this world, because it's just gotten back to normal, and there is nothing normal about my life anymore. And so that's definitely a time where people need what I call compassionate care, because that's when they have to learn how to integrate their sadness into real life, because our life does go on. That's the reality. Life does go on, and we can't stop living just because we're sad about a loved one who stopped living. We need to continue on, and we need to have a good life. We need to feel joy. We need to be loving. We need to receive love. All of that needs to continue on. So how do we do that? And that's where and you know, there's grief counseling, there's a lot of different things. Psychologists do great work as well, but you know, it really is about having support to just help you get through each day. Because, and you know, when we're going through it, I hate to say to people, you know, time heals, you know, it gets better with time, because at the time you're thinking, no amount of time to fix this, shut up, you know, that's not helpful. So I, you know, I don't ever say that, but I'm thinking it, because I know that in time, and it could be a year, 2 years, 5 years, it's different for everyone, but normal life does slowly become manageable again, but you need support through that time. So yeah, that's a really important time to remember our friends or whoever's going through it, because you know, we go to the funeral and we're all like, oh my God, this is so sad, and I love you and I'm here for you, let me know if you need anything. No one's going to call up and say, I'm really freaking sad, can you come and like,
can you bring me lasagna?
But you know, so we have to be more, you know, proactive in it, because we sort of tend to sit back and just go, oh, I you know, I did the right thing, and I you know, I told them that I'm here for them. We need to do a little bit more than that.
Sometimes we don't need to we just need to do it and not talk about it. That's
right.
Okay, so just briefly describe your you probably don't have a typical day or a typical week, but what does your week involve, or what do your days involve?
Wow, okay, just briefly. So my weeks involve if somebody dies that week and I need to do a family, you know, be there for a family, planning a funeral or a celebration, a memorial, whatever, that's basically my week. Everything else needs to get shifted around, because that's very time sensitive. Same if somebody's dying imminently and you need to be there. At this point, a lot of people are still just wanting a lot of phone check-in and a lot of phone time, so I can spend a lot of time here in my little office, you know, on the phone. I'll do a little bit of Zoom, not much though, it's mostly on the phone, or sometimes FaceTime, just talking to people. I spend a lot of time talking to people, actually. That's probably the biggest part of my week. If there's no funeral plans actually in place at the moment, well, then I'm working on building my business, to be honest. I'm still, you know, bonding with social media and trying to bring my awareness out in that space. But also I'm still very much in a planning space of, what do I want to do for my community? So I'm in the, you know, grief circle planning stages, and I'm very much in, what else can I do? What, you know, what can I do for Dying to Know Day? What can I do for, you know, the Day of the Dead? What does my community need? What do the families that I'm talking to need? I do follow up with them, you know, the families that I have worked with earlier on in the year, you know, I check in on them. So I'm mainly checking in on a lot of people. That's probably, you know, whether it's over some of it's email. I write a lot of cards and I post a lot of cards to people. So the work itself doesn't just stop when I'm not in front of a family. It just, you know, there's a lot of behind the scenes, you know, learning more about how to get into some of the aged care systems, because, you know, we've had a big change in the last couple of years. There's a lot of new restrictions. You know, what do families need? How can I help in that space? Yeah, I think that is as brief as
that leads me to my next question, which is, you know, you just touched on, you know, you're there for people. Now I know, because we're not in the same line of work, but we're in similar lines of work where our energy is given to other people a lot of the time. And I know how tiring that can be energetically. And I know the importance of, you know, making sure that I take care of me. How does that look for you? Is that something that you're good at, or you need to work on, or obviously some weeks are more challenging than others as well?
Yeah, it's a time sensitive thing too, isn't it? Some weeks I'm better at it because I have more time for self-care. But I do, regular yoga practices, and I do Nia dancing. So I have, physical outlets. I try to walk on the beach as often as I can, not as often as I should. I do a lot of meditation.
Yeah,
that's probably my biggest thing, because I can do that at home and it's free, and and I have a beautiful space here to do it in. So, and I do a lot of journaling as well, which is really helpful, because processing everything that I come across, because it's all confidential too. I can't just be sprouting off to people, oh, this happened and this happened, she said this and she said that. So I do a lot of journaling and a lot of expressing of my inward, and obviously the work I do as well brings up a lot of personal issues for me as well. So I do a lot of processing in that, and usually it's through, I play a lot of music, sing in my own space and dance in my own backyard, and so it's like a physical, you got to almost shake it off, kind of thing, but not shake it off. You got to process it, but then release it is what it is. And I guess the self-care comes from my connection with my family and friends too. So I have really special bonds with my husband, my sister, my niece, my nephew, my brother-in-law, and some really close friends that are practically family that I spend time with, and don't talk about work. Like, I'm just there as as a friend, or as a, and my grandparents, I spend a lot of time with them too. So human connection is really important for me in all of that positive aspect, because that's what fills my cup up, to be able to go and be in people's sadness, So, back to that question a second ago, though, about what else I do in my week, I just thought of two key things that I spend doing in my week, and that is compassionate care sessions with people who are grieving. I sit with them and just sit with them for whatever they need. We just talk. We, open up like I said, it's not counselling as such, because there's nothing to fix. But so I do a lot of compassionate care sessions with people who are grieving, and I do a lot of end of life planning with people who aren't dying. Okay. So that's the big thing that I really am advocating at the moment, because like you said before, we leave a lot of this stuff to the very last minute, and sometimes people don't have that opportunity. So encouraging people to put plans in place. I have an end of life plans and wishes record that we go through very meticulously and answer a lot of questions, and and then they have this document to give to their family members, and just in case anything happens. And it includes their funeral ceremony plan, and it includes how they'd like to be cared for if and when they need to be cared for, and it includes all of that business end of stuff, like passwords and logins and things,
practicalities. Like that. It would be amazing if that kind of service was incorporated into aged care, like you said, because a lot of the time, and I see it, is families are dealing with that on top of dementia or Alzheimer's, and it's kind of if that was documented before that journey, or early on in that journey with dementia, I'm sure that would help to alleviate a lot of the pressure and the stress and the kind of second guessing of, like, what would mum have wanted? Like, what would dad have wanted? I wish I'd asked.
Absolutely.
We never talked about it. I don't actually know what his favourite song was, or I don't know what flowers she'd like, or whether she even wants flowers. Like, it's all those kind of things.
And that's all of that stuff that you just mentioned is part of what this record is about, because you're so right. I've seen it time and again where people in the family are like, she didn't want that, did she? It's like, well, how do I know what she wanted? I didn't ever ask that question. Or, nah, she wouldn't have wanted that. Well, yes, she did, because she told me how, and so it takes away the discord that can happen between people who could make different decisions. And it also, like you said, in aged care, or whatever situation it is, or if they just get sick and all of a sudden there's so many other things to think about and make decisions about, if you've got a document there that can take a bit of the pressure off some of the decision making, it just makes it takes a big load off the family who have to plan everything. And there's also comfort that you receive in being able to honour your person's wishes. When you know what they want, and you're like, I can do that, and sure, some things may have changed in the time that you wrote it to when you need to use it, but you do the best you can with the current situation, and that's actually a really amazing thing for the family to be able to do. So yeah, that's really, really important, and I'm a huge advocate about end of life planning, and I think my friends are sick of hearing me bang on about it, but I think like things happen, and we just and I don't think people don't like having the conversation. Even my husband can't commit to what he wants, because he jokes about it, so yeah, not quite comfortable with death yet maybe, but we're working on that.
I think it's also important to remember that not every family, like the siblings, get on. So, and you might have one that is super practical and super organized and almost can separate from the emotions, but then someone else is overcome with the emotions and can't focus on the practicalities. And then sometimes it becomes about what the children want rather than what the person wants. And having that plan in place can alleviate some of that pressure and stop the bickering, because let's be honest, not every family gets on at the best of times, let alone when they're facing the death of a loved one, and they've got all that emotion thrown in. And you might have those that are like, this has got to be done, 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 and someone else is like, well, can we actually slow down a little bit and do this? So yeah, I think having a plan is a huge relief for families.
Yeah, for all of those reasons and many more. Yeah.
Okay, we're going to end, because I knew we'd just keep talking.
Yeah. It's been easy to talk.
I know. We're going to end with your, and I'm going to say try and keep it brief, but I know we probably won't. 3 ways that you can help families and loved ones.
Okay. Well, first of all, it is the end of life planning, which we've really just covered there. So really important. Put some plans in place. If not officially with someone like me, just do it yourself. But that's definitely the most important thing to do, regardless of how old you are, regardless of whether you're sick or not. Put some plans in place and tell your family where to find them. Secondly, the farewell ceremony. Ceremonies and ritual are really important for our bereavement. And, a lot of people think, oh, I don't need a funeral. I don't, and no, you don't, you're dead, but your family probably does need a way to say goodbye. So think of them and allow your family to put something in place. And so what I love doing is, creating that beautiful ceremony with the family in a beautiful, unique way for whatever they need to honour their person. So whether it's really traditional, churches and burials and, cremation services and things like that, that's all perfect. Or you can do something really unique, and actually really love it when people want to get a bit creative and do it in their back garden, or, a meaningful outdoor place that means something to their family. There's something very, very special about farewelling someone in the great outdoors. It's very freeing. You can celebrate freely, you can grieve freely, and there's so many more options than people probably think. There's a lot outside of the box that we can do. And being a celebrant as well, I get to not only plan it with families that I may have been working with through death, but then I get to officiate the ceremony as well, which is just so special. It's that natural progression for me, which I absolutely love. And the third way doula can help, and I love to help my families, is that compassionate care. So, taking aside all of that planning and preparation prior to death, but just the emotional side of things, giving them a space to freely express what they need to all the way through. So that can start before death, during the death, and then after the death as well. So it's just that ongoing journey with people, being there for them from the practical side of things as well as the emotional side of things.
Beautiful. Well done.
Thank you.
So I guess we talked about social media and your website. Where can we find you?
Website is www.mcleodwithasilverlining.com.au.
Yep.
Facebook, it's the same, I think. McLeod with a Silver Lining, End of Life Celebrant and Doula. And Instagram is just @McLeod with a silver lining. I tried to keep it all fairly the same. That's about it.
And we will pop that in the show notes anyway for anyone that wants to find you. Where are you based? I didn't ask that question.
I'm Sunshine Coast, Queensland. Beautiful Queensland. Yeah. Beautiful. Sunny, hot.
Yeah. Hot at the moment.
Yeah, hot. Really hot.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate being able to talk about the things that, you know, people find difficult to talk about, and hopefully by doing more of this kind of work, then we can gradually make a change and people aren't scared to talk about it. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's been an absolute thrill. Thanks,
Anne-Marie.